So, welcome everybody. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's really good to see you all. And also knowing that we have a lot of our colleagues with us online. It is high time, and it's actually very late to wish you a Happy New Year. But I have to do that because, unfortunately, we had to cancel last time. Some of you may know I went down with the flu. I don't like to admit it, but sometimes that happens, and it happened on a day of what was the planned day for the town hall. But here we are, and today's agenda, if I am... No, I was not successful. So where are we? There we are. So, upside down, but still back to the agenda. We will have something about the 2018 numbers, results. I will talk a bit about focus for this year, and also give you an update from meetings and conferences, actually from our positioning work, and also by introducing more about the S3I initiative. We will, as usual, have the Q&A, and to make this agenda more live, I will, of course, welcome more people to the stage. Our CFO, Marianne, as well as Vitaly, you already know very well. But let me tell a bit more before I hand it over to Marianne. Actually, when I was reflecting on last year, the first thing that came into my mind was that this is already the third year of the Agenda 2030. The third year. And entering 2019 leaves us with 11 years to implement the bold Sustainable Development Goals. The big we, nations, as well as private sector and the international society. Have we done our share? Well, actually, 2018 was, again, the best year ever for UNOPS. And this is a great achievement. And we are so well positioned also to do more. And I really look forward to 2019 when I look at you, when I think of colleagues around the world, because I think we can do more together. And I'm also thinking of how we did our GLM discussions, how we actually followed up on the bold ambitions of our strategic plan. You know, also through the People Survey, we focused leadership and communications. We have started a big leadership program for members of the COG, and we have taken the communication challenge into different initiatives, but you know, under the umbrella of the Knowledge Management Initiative, that a lot is happening. The responsibility to drive this is a corporate and under the leadership of Nick. But he will never be able to be successful alone. The executive office will never be able to drive this through successfully, even if we have Nick on the team. It will only be successful if, again, we do this together. And this is quite transformational. You have heard it talks about reinventing work. We have established a new set of tools, and we have established new networks that you know as COPs. We all share the responsibility to get this going, to make it a success. And if you think about corporate initiatives, some of you may think there are quite many. Actually, there are quite few. Some would like to think there were more because sometimes that helps in budget discussions. But they are actually quite few. And knowledge management is one of the most important ones, together with what has been put under the headline leadership. It has to do about culture. It has to do how we help each other to deliver more, better. We did a great job in the governance, risk and compliance last year. And actually were able to close that corporate initiative by the end of the year with a new governance framework and policies in place. Of course, closing the corporate initiative does not tell me or you that the job is done. This will be a continuous job for all of us to make sure that the framework is the best we can have. And we help each other to identify what still is not in place, what we can do better. So these are some of the headlines that I well remember from 2018. I also remember very well our gender parity strategy and our gender mainstreaming strategy in our project development and design, as well as implementation. On the gender parity strategy, I think it's really important also to bear in mind how important this is not only to UNOPS, but to the whole UN. How we want to reflect the society, how we want to improve opportunities for all, and how important gender parity is in that context. Where are we as an organization? 2018 shows the numbers are pretty much where they were the year before. We have a job to do at all levels. Of course, we have some areas where we are better and some where we are not so good. Overall, I like to tell engineers that this is about numbers. We have the policies in place, we know what we need to do, but we need action. So also in the 2019, my expectations in people managers will be more concrete. Of course, from COG all through the organization. And I hope we, again, can work together on this. If I now go to the more sort of numeric part of 2018 results, I would like to introduce to you our new CFO, Marianne. Some of you may know her. Actually, Marianne is French. You may have known that she has been working in the private sector with fashion, champagne, and cosmetics. That's actually quite interesting. Also to hear how she is able to bring new ideas, new ways of working, and challenge what we have maybe done over years and started to forget why, or maybe not really want to ask why. And I also think the experience from the months we've had with you, Marianne, you show what a good people manager you are, and what you therefore bring not only to your own team, but to the broader UNOPS team. And why do I say this much about Marianne? Actually, it's because I've decided to delete the OIC. She will not longer be officer in charge. She will be appointed the permanent CFO. The floor is yours, Marianne.
Thank you very much, Greta. It's not difficult for me to take the floor after everything you said. I will try not to bore you with too many figures on the financial performance of UNOPS for 2018, but give you really a snapshot of what happened. So, as you can see here, with the key performance indicator, we have a lot of green, and green is good usually, right? So we have only one yellow one on delivery because we haven't reached our target, but still increasing compared to last year. I will just take the opportunity to dwell a bit more on three of these very important indicators. The first one is delivery. We almost reached 1.9 billion in delivery in 2018, which is a great achievement, plus 2% versus last year, and on already a very strong result achieved in 2017. But more interestingly, if you look back at 2014, we were able to increase by more than 50% the total delivery of UNOPS, and that is an amazing achievement. And when you look at 19 target, we plan to do even better and reach the 2 billion threshold. So again, very strong achievement in delivery. Engagement addition. What is engagement addition? It is what we sign during the year with our partners. So it is the contract that we have in hand for future delivery. And here we achieved a very impressive plus almost 30% versus a target with 2.2 billion signed last year. What you can see, very interestingly, is that over the last 3 years, we consistently signed more than 2 billion. It is very impressive, especially compared to the years before that, where we were significantly lower. And what we signed today is the delivery of tomorrow. So this shows how strong the business model of UNOPS is and the trust that our partners have in our operations. And finally, net revenue, a bit more tricky one. What is the net revenue? It is the net engagement revenue, so the fees that we receive from our partners, minus the management expenses. Management expenses are mainly HQ expenditure, and also part of the regional and local offices expenditure. This is kind of our net profit, I would say, even if profit we can't say, but it's not our net revenue. And here, I think that the numbers speaks for themselves. Every year, we've been able to deliver more, and even to reach 33 million this year. It is very impressive, and it shows how solid financially UNOPS is now. And this is money that can then be invested in other projects, as we'll see later. So again, very strong year in 2018, and very strong ambition for next year as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. And again, I think numbers are really interesting in showing the solid platform we stand on. But of course, it's also about the content and how we're able to take what we do further. So that is why I would like to take us back again a bit to how we are advancing the strategic plan. You've heard me talk a lot about positioning. We want to be known, recognized, and a resource. And frankly, to be a resource, you need to be known and recognized. These things don't come without a consistent and strong focus over time. So that's why I come back to these three: be known, be recognized, and a resource. It's all because we have the ambition to deliver more to achieve the Agenda 2030. And we also, through the work on the strategic plan, highlighted 3 areas where we think we have much to give. It's around cost-efficient service delivery to help our partners achieve what they want. It's about effectiveness, being smart, innovative in ways of making our partners succeed. And of course, because the Agenda 2030 requires the big money, it's about how we can access new funding, how we can impact more money in a sustainable manner. Really important to achieve the SDGs. In my meeting with the executive board, I therefore highlighted 2 things. Both what we can offer to achieve the bigger Agenda 2030, and also on a smaller scale, what we can do to help the UN reform succeed. These 2 things are interlinked, but they are about very different things. And it's very helpful to be reminded by the numbers, because when we look at what is necessary, you find that $7 trillion are needed annually. 6 will have to come from the private sector, only 1 trillion from the public sector. And what do you know about ODA? It's $150 billion, the smallest of the numbers I mentioned. So clearly we need to go out of the ODA space if we want to play an important role in achieving the Agenda 2030. Who are our partners? UN portfolio is now around 30% of our delivery. Most of what we do in addition is working with countries directly, both as donors and recipients, but also governments who would like to improve their public spend. And that's very interesting. Bilateral partners among governments are growing in our portfolio. And of course, the third important pillar is the private sector. And we come back to the S3I, because this is projects with impact far beyond the ODA. Our contributions to the UN reform, and you've heard me repeat this in my speeches now for quite some time, is we can improve delivery of shared services inside the UN. We can help make procurement more efficient, higher quality, more sustainable. We would like to help implementation of infrastructure projects to a higher quality, and also to recognized global standards, transparent. This is something that our UN partners hear me talk about all the time. And we have already announced our strong support to the reform. We have paid even our double contribution to the RC system. And we're ready to contribute more if we are invited. And then I don't talk about so much the financial part of it. I'm talking about our expertise. In the board, there is a very strong support to UNOPS. And this time, when we presented also the S3I initiative in more details, there is not only support, there is strong excitement. Because they see that this could possibly be a very important breakthrough for the UN. And I also hear it from members of the Bureau of the joint UNDP, UNFPA and UNOPS board that this is important. So on these pictures, you also see me meeting some of the board members bilaterally. And this time the Bureau, consisting of 5 member states, have all put in their PRs as representative. So the highest ranking Bureau, at least that I've experienced in my time with UNOPS. And this is interesting. Okay, if you want to be known, you actually have to tell the story. Also outside the UN. So this year, we decided to go to Davos, the World Economic Forum. And I hope you have actually been able to read our book, our publication, about the hidden champion, the one who provides smart solutions to impossible challenges. I think it's a good read. I hope it's a good read for you, but I also, of course, hope it's a good read for many. Also, in governments, in multilaterals, outside the UN, as well as inside. So we're telling the story, and in this event in Davos, we were also able to meet with ministers, and I can tell you the one in the middle smiling together with me, even if I have a black dress, that the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Finland. And it's quite interesting that Finland has taken such a great interest in us, and maybe Vitali will reveal a bit to you why. I've never been received as well as I was by the President of Mexico last week. And I don't know if you can see it in the lower right corner, but to have the President as a guide showing me the murals in the National Palace is something. I'm not sure that he is chaperoning or telling the story to too many of his guests. I really felt honored by the way they received us. They see UNOPS as their partner, their strategic partner, in making public management more efficient, more effective, more transparent, actually helping fight corruption in a much stronger manner than what has been the case so far. They have learned about what we've been able to do in other countries. They bring us on board because we have a track record. We can show examples of how we work and grow from there. I really have expectations in this partnership with Mexico. I have expectations that we, under the knowledge management initiative, internally also get better at sharing best practices, find out what works in particular countries' geographies and what is transferable to other countries and geographies in a better manner than what we have done so far. That is why that initiative was launched. That is why the COPs are so important, and they need to be used. They need to live under the guidance of our directors. So here I think we have an opportunity, and here are some of the examples that will be very interesting to watch as we go forward. So you can see how the President is actually applauding the signing of the agreement. It is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and therefore the minister that I'm shaking hands with up in the right corner. But our regional director and his team is already talking to other line ministries about our support and what we can work together on. I don't know if you have seen this, but UN City has actually become more known among, of course, ambassadors located in Copenhagen. But more frequently, we are also becoming part of programs of ministers and visitors to Copenhagen. They would like to come to UN City, and actually, more often they want to come to UNOPS. So when I am on a picture in the middle with a Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from Albania, why I put up that picture is actually that this has already caused discussions with the government of Albania about potential cooperation in that country. And the other men on both sides, they come because they see UNOPS as important partners in what they want to achieve. It may be a long journey, it may be a shorter journey, it might be very concrete, or it might be quite high level. But why am I saying this? There are more people who know us now. There are more decision makers who know us now. Not only know us, but they want to work with us. And why do they want to work with us? It's because of all the wonderful work you and your colleagues are doing. It's so important that you understand that this can only happen if it's linked to what we're doing on the ground. The minute I start over-promising, it will be nice to see you, bye-bye, and nevermore. So we need to stay grounded, we need to stay to work together, and it can be such a great journey. So, a resource, I mean, known and recognized. How can we be a resource? Beyond the projects that we normally do, we have started to talk about the S3I, the Social Impact Investing Initiative. Why do presidents of Kenya, Ghana, India, and Caribbean islands want to work with us? They have already signed agreements with us on big, affordable housing schemes. Of course, homes are important to everyone. Affordable homes are important to all of us, but to many, it's only a dream. How can we help that dream come true? In countries where you see that big housing schemes have not really gone live. What is missing? And is there something that UNOPS can fix? It's the big question, Vitali. But I really would like you to explain again a bit more about where we are on the S3I initiative. It's involving so many people's lives, creating hope's future for so many, that this is, I think, again, an initiative that can take UNOPS to a new level. Please.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hello, everybody. Just to quickly demonstrate how everything we do at UNOPS is closely related, let me give you one story. It's about 3 minutes old. Just received an email as Greta was speaking. I haven't read it all, okay, I was listening. But I read the first line on my phone, and the email came from a very senior person from Morgan Stanley Infrastructure Fund. And he literally said, I hear you did something very interesting in Mexico. Can we talk? Right? You know why? Because all the infrastructure funds were so concerned, so worried about new, supposedly radical leftist president coming to power, and then all the investment deals will be cancelled and terminated, and lots of worries. So most of the institutional investors decided that for a period of 6 to 12 months, they will do nothing new in Mexico until they see how the new administration is behaving. And now they can see what kind of treatment UNOPS received in Mexico, and they want to talk even more. Of course, it will not be our first interaction. We've been in touch for about 18 months. But they all know what UNOPS is doing, and they realize what happened in Mexico, which was, without exaggeration, a very big deal, not just for UNOPS, but also for UN. So clearly the things are very much intertwined, related, and UNOPS is becoming better recognized, definitely known, and potentially becoming a significant resource, certainly to the Mexican government. And we'll come back to tell you more about that, because some of the initiatives that the president talked about at the event are quite groundbreaking. Maybe I can give some hint, if you don't mind. He gave a couple of examples. Right when we spoke to everybody, with all the dignitaries present and ambassadors and the entire UN system, he referred to a $4 billion pharmaceutical program in Mexico. He said he was elected on the promise to seriously fight corruption. He knows what UNOPS did in the area of drug procurement in other countries, including some of the neighboring countries to Mexico, and he's definitely interested in UNOPS participating. He talked about a very strategic program for the government of building a railway going roughly from north to south of the country through 5 or 6 states. It's a $7 to $8 billion program, and there are several other. So he, rightly or wrongly, sees UNOPS as an entity that should get involved in the implementation of all the major strategic initiatives for the country. And you know, it's one of the most influential middle-income countries in the world today. So that's just one quick example. And of course, it's more of a coincidence, but you will also recall that when we spoke last time on S3I, we told you that we managed to achieve financial close on our first ever S3I projects, and it happens to be in Mexico. It was a wind farm in the northern state of Nuevo León. Even though we had that project in 2019 on the books for only 3 months, some good things started happening. You remember we inherited a pretty complicated deal with quite a few problems there. But we already generated some income for UNOPS, which Mariana processed on the books. So things are beginning to look good, and we started also talking about the next phase. And today I will only give you a very quick update on where we stand, because a lot will probably be happening next week. That is our hope. And that a lot can only happen if we sign some very important tripartite agreements, which will include governments, for sure, but also private sector partners. And that's a new area for us. It's a little bit untested. In many ways, it's very sensitive. But as Greta was alluding to earlier today, this is the only way to achieve SDGs, because the absolute bulk of the funding can only come from different types of institutional investors. Of course, with support from UN and governments, but the public sector simply does not have enough resources for developing countries to achieve SDGs in the next 11 and a bit years. Now, in terms of UNOP-specific time and resource allocation to projects, we decided to prioritize 5 initiatives, and I will mention them in quick succession, because that's not the focus of the conversation today. Broadly speaking, 4 of them are in the area of housing, something that we are very much accustomed to as an infrastructure agency. 2 of them we mentioned last time when we spoke. There's projects very close to finalization of the negotiation stage, to be precise, in Kenya and Ghana, each one approximately 100,000 homes, affordable homes. The so-called gross development value, or to make it a little bit easier to understand, its sales value of the homes. The current estimate that it will be just under 5 billion in Ghana and a little bit over 5 billion in Kenya, so for a total of about 10 billion. So these are the 2 housing initiatives. The third one is India, where we're negotiating 2 deals. One of them is already signed by the government in the state of Goa. We still have not signed ourselves, but may do so as early as next week, if the negotiation is properly finalized. And then there is another initiative with regard to redevelopment of a slum in the state of Maharashtra. You probably all know the city of Mumbai, or otherwise known as Bombay, which is the capital of that very large state in India. So that may be another possibility, and UNOPS will very likely get involved in that project. So that was number 3. The fourth one is a portfolio of projects in different Caribbean states. We only looked at those islands in the Caribbean which are UN member states. There are many other, but they're kind of territories of other governments. So the hope is that we will be able to build approximately 10,000, much smaller number, but for them it's extremely significant. 10,000 homes in 4 to 6 island states in the Caribbean. And we happen to conclude our social due diligence phase of due diligence on those projects from the social perspective just in the last few days. It was a quick whirlwind tour of 5 countries in about 4.5 days. And we only came back from that mission yesterday, and the results were quite good. The governments are ready to go, a lot of support at the highest level, which in those cases is Prime Minister level. And we are trying to mobilize significant resources externally to supplement our modest contribution to those projects. So that's number 4. Now, when I say that these 4 initiatives are all about housing, that is obviously correct, because we have to build homes. But the idea is that on top of all those housing units, we will build, as you may remember from our last discussion, solar roof tiles. So it's a bit of a combination of housing and renewable energy, 2 in 1. The 5th initiative is not so easy to describe because it's actually a global portfolio of renewable energy deals. So we have not agreed to sign any specific deal, but we narrowed down the list of potential opportunities from about 220 to currently about 32 or 33. And the interesting part is that those opportunities exist not only in OECD countries, for which it's easier to find money. And OECD countries, as you may remember, where we can operate, are limited to Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Turkey. So there are quite a few interesting deals in Mexico and Colombia in particular. I don't think it's very likely we'll go into Chile and Turkey soon. But the much more relevant part is that we came across some really good deals in many other geographies where typical institutional investors would not even dream of going to, such as Democratic Republic of Congo, Cambodia and Myanmar, and quite a few other countries that I will not mention now. Mongolia is another rare one. So those deals are being looked at. Some of them are individual deals, some are portfolio deals. For instance, we're looking at a large portfolio of relatively small hydro deals in India, but the total number of those deals is very large. And they offer very good return on our investment. And I think if we can help governments, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, and in harder to get money for countries in Southeast Asia to fund those deals, then UNOPS will be even more known and recognized. As far as the financial part of those deals, because we are very cognizant of the need to cover our costs and do a little bit better, there are three types of financial flows that, if everything goes well, will go to UNOPS. The one is if we provide services to those projects, which we intend to do, then we will be compensated, like in the case of our regular projects. The second part is when we invest in our own cash, and now we're thinking of up to $50 million to be invested globally into all of those deals that I mentioned, which is roughly equivalent to 26% of our operational reserves, which at the end of last year stood at just shy of $200 million. So that's a very good achievement for UNOPS. So when we make those investments, we will be getting an annual dividend of 10 to 12% on our contribution, which is no small amount of money. It's actually very large. And then on top of that, and this is a big improvement compared to the first deal we signed last year in Mexico, UNOPS will get a 5% free equity in all of those deals, which means we're actually not paying anything. We're getting that in the private sector, some would call it sweat equity, is because we worked very hard to get those deals structured and done. The investors agree that UNOPS would get 5% free equity, unpaid equity. And that means whatever profits are generated by the deal, we'll get 5% of that. And to make it even better, which is a very rare thing, this 5% is not diluted, which means if later on other investors come in and invest a significant amount of resources, which is what will happen, then those who came into the deal early get diluted, meaning their 5% in this case would go down. But in our case, it's fixed. So that means other investors that come later will get a smaller share, and we will keep our 5%. So financially, at least, these are very good deals, no question about that. But there are obviously risks. Whenever you invest, there is no such thing as zero risk investment. There are always risks. Even when we invest cash into AAA bonds, there are still some risks. Things happen. And no doubt, if we get invested in 50 projects, not all 50 of them will go well. There will be some issues, operational issues, but we'll deal with that. We're a very strong team now. The only other item I would like to briefly touch on today is Greta already hinted earlier that we were in discussions with the Finnish government. These were blitz discussions that we did not, frankly, expect to go into. You know, we were talking to 4 or 5 governments from many geographies around the world about possibly hosting the S3I hub if we decide to place it outside of Denmark. And Finland, to be brutally honest, somewhat to our surprise, made big advances in that respect. They seem to be extremely keen on welcoming UNOPS to the country. So we are at a fairly advanced stage of negotiating a host country agreement. Greta will be going there next week with a lot of support from headquarters team for the next phase of those negotiations. And well, we will obviously not go into technical details today, but we expect if negotiations proceed well and reach the fruition, then the legal side of the deal will be strong, and we would also like to get some kind of financial contribution, ideally to the extent that UNOPS would not need to invest its own resources in sourcing future S3I deals for the organization. So while it's by no means decided and finalized, there is a strong possibility that UNOPS S3I unit, which will always remain very small, by the way, may be based in neighboring Finland. Thank you.
I hope you find this as exciting news as I do. And talking about numbers, if we succeed with these projects, it's always about how we then also redeploy the surplus into projects that will contribute to the Agenda 2030. I think that is also a very important part of the story. Time for questions. I remember when we met last time in October, there were a good round of questions. I really hope you've kept the inspiration and will do the same. You know there is a tool, online tool as well, so Nicola is here watching if anything's coming in online. But as I see you all here in Copenhagen, you're also free to raise your hand, and maybe there are even some microphones. At least I have one here. Yeah, we have in the audiences too. So who wants to go first? And as always, I pick and choose, answer what I think I can do myself, and leave the dishes to Vitaly and Marianne. Now I have two at least to share with. Okay, Katrin.
Thank you very much for the very good information, and félicitations à Marianne. This is a question to Vitaly, actually. First of all, congratulations to both of you. This is an impressive development, and we're all watching this with a lot of interest. Vitaly has articulated already that there are some investments that UNOPS brings to the table. For us for those of us who are involved in business development, it is extremely interesting to understand exactly the whole range of value addition that UNOPS brings to the table. I think it is more than just the investment itself. It's the UN name, I guess, it's our name, but it's probably also on the technical side aspects, and it would be so helpful if we had a short narrative so that we can help in improving and raising the awareness, and potentially also help to identify more opportunities.
Absolutely, and when you make your way to the stage, Vitaly, here, I would also say that one of the very important aspects of what we do under the S3I initiative is demonstrated by the fact that there will be transfer of knowledge and know-how to UNOPS in these projects. And we actually acquire knowledge while paid. So we have identified partners in the private sector who see UNOPS and UN as this important tool that they also are willing to invest in. So it's not only us investing in projects and future homes for many of our beneficiaries. It goes both ways. And I think this is the beauty of the S3I initiative. Social impact investing is an initiative that attracts not only UN and UN partners, but also private. When we talk about the Agenda 2030, and if you can drive sustainability with a return, I think these projects are really showing that, yes, you can. You can drive sustainability with a return, and it's actually needed because, as you heard, the private sector is such a great and important part of the whole Agenda 2030 and its success. But I don't know, Vitaly, if you have more to add. Why do we invest in this? And some of you may have actually promoted and submitted investment cases and even got a no from the executive office. So is that unfair, or is it simply showing that whether it is a private or whether it is a UNOPS-initiated investment project, it will have to show that the investment pays off. So in that sense, the S3I investments sit in the same boat as the investment cases that you may be more familiar with, the internal ones. If we don't see a return on internal investments, they get a no in the executive office. And you know why? Because I say our beneficiaries will never benefit from UN becoming more costly and less efficient. So we have to provide also the kind of similar review, strict review, on the cases we submit ourselves. So the details on the S3I, Vitaly.
Thank you, Greta. Better now? Okay. Some details. When we look at cases that come our way on S3I specifically, and I'm not referring to general investment cases coming from our field offices, we look at them with a lot of sympathy. But many of those, to be, again, brutally honest, most of the requests that we get, the amounts are not high at all. Very few of them go into millions. It's mostly tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the absolute majority of those cases is about hiring more people. And it's not that we are necessarily opposed to that, but very often those cases look like an addition to the already approved management budget. So we're not saying no to that, and we did approve quite a few. But of course, an ideal business case that we would get from a field office is not about hiring more personnel. That could be part of the business case, but it should not be the only thing. And ideally, the business case would either lead to better positioning of UNOPS in a specific country or region, or it would lead to better impact, which would include financial resources. When we look at S3I cases, it's basically no different, except there's even more scrutiny because some of the resources that we may invest will not stay within the organization, but they will go into an external special purpose vehicle. And we have to demonstrate with more clarity than in the usual regular course of business that we are generating financial and social value. And the social part is extremely important. Today, again, I don't need to tell you, you know this very well, we do not really look at social aspects of our regular cases. We kind of assume that if UNOPS gets involved, then things are fine from that perspective. But we do not do a formal assessment. With S3I cases, we have to, and it's a very heavy assessment. And we look at that first, and then look at financials. And if the socials are not right, we do not even look at financials. That's how important it is. And many governments actually find that extremely helpful. Just last week, on that specific hydro project in India that I mentioned, the government came to us, and they asked a question. Today, we have to pay $500,000 a year on that specific project to a private sector consultancy company, and they kind of provide an umbrella for us. So if things go wrong on the ground with communities or individual stakeholders, if something is not fine, then they will get involved and deal with that issue. So it's like an insurance money. And then they say, why would we pay to a private sector company when we can partner with UNOPS? Maybe it will cost less, maybe even not. It doesn't matter. But clearly, UNOPS will be in a stronger position to deal with those issues because we know how to deal with communities, grassroots activists, etc., etc. So those issues become very important. On the financial side, I will not dwell on that today because you all understand how financial assessments are made. Marianne has a lot of experience with that. So do some other colleagues that are part of our enhanced engagement acceptance committee that look at all the cases. But on the technical, because it's so fresh in my mind, only 48 hours old, I wanted to share with you one very quick story on the technicalities. In Antigua and Barbuda, one of the 6 countries where we're considering to build homes, we looked at some homes that are already built by the companies that we are likely to partner with, even though it's not yet finalized. And we'll give all those details if and when that deal is completed. Some of the houses that they completed are very new, and some are more or less 4 or 5 years old. And those that were completed 4 or 5 years old, they withstood 3 major hurricanes and not a scratch on them. We even brought photos with us because it's hard to believe. And you see some other houses next to them which were completely or partially destroyed. So clearly the resilience of the technology matters a lot. And then you look at the cost. The government of Antigua tried very hard to go ahead with the social housing program, but the best they could do, for different reasons, not necessarily their fault, the cost of the house average is 250,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars. Divide that by roughly 3.5 to get US dollars. The houses that we are going to build, and it's not even conceptual because quite a few of them have already been built, the cost is 120,000, so less than half. So much better quality, less than half the price. Enormous value for those people that will eventually own their first home. So good socials, good financials, and UNOPS in the middle, enabling all of those deals. That's the idea.
Okay. A lot of food for thoughts. Any more questions? Please. It's just coming.
S3I again.
Yep.
Which is very exciting. Just a quick question. You talk a lot about the team, a strong team. Just a little bit more about what does that mean for UNOPS? Have we got, how many personnel are we planning to have on this? And as a unit, you say you want to keep it deliberately quite small, but how's that going to work? So very much a small unit working with private sector entities to do all the due diligence, the technical assessments, etc., etc. And then how potentially you also talk about then UNOPS being involved in this. But then if we're almost, in some cases, looking to compete against private sector capacity in these areas, we may be unable to meet that those expectations, etc.
So you talk about how will we organize and structure this?
So number one, a little bit about how that organised and structured, because there's been some discussion past of a separate kind of a firewall almost between UNOPS and S3I team. I'm not sure how that's what that is. And then secondly, about again just really understanding, because of what the capacity there is, how really is UNOPS going to be involved or potentially involved, really in getting business as usual for us.
For me, it has been very important to understand the risks involved and manage the risks to the extent that we don't risk more than what we have sort of agreed to put at risk. So the formal structure around the money is important. I don't foresee that we should come with more than one standard in how we do projects. So whether they are funded by public or private, we come with one team. So it has to do with the way we also calculate costs and cost recovery. So we don't establish a model where we do cross-subsidizing between public and private partners beyond what they have agreed. We don't have all these legal things in place. But what is really important to me to say to you, coming from IPMG, the infrastructure team, is that I don't foresee we should have 2 infrastructure teams. But I actually hope, as I said, that we can find ways of working with private partners that allow us to grow our competence. So in this first deal, we get actually paid for tagging along what is also a private construction company who knows how to build big housing schemes. We know pretty much about it, but maybe not at the scale and size that is involved here, and maybe also this is new locations. So this will, of course, have to be negotiated in more details, but the message I have to you, there is only one way of doing things in UNOPS. But we may have difficult ways of funding, different ways of funding the projects. So it may have impact on our way of calculating the costs involved. For now, I don't have all the answers. Together, we need to bring all the questions to the table and make sure we solve them up front. as well as we can. Is there anything else you would like to add? Because the formal structure that Vitaly spoke about, maybe established in Finland, is to get our hands around the financial risks and also the governance of the projects we decide to sign. Actually, this is models that are known. They may be different, more at national level, not so much at international level. So to the UN, this is a breakthrough, but we don't work sort of in the complete dark. We know where to sort of collect inspiration and also therefore seek advice from partners who have already been engaged in these kinds of projects. Okay. If you have more questions, Steve, please put them on the table. Yep, Itai.
Thank you very much, Grete, and the rest of the senior management team. I am particularly impressed with the results 3 years running where UNOPS has done so well. And I would also just want to acknowledge the efforts of all colleagues across the world in UNOPS for contributing to that. My question is, given such strong performance, what is the ambition? For you thinking maybe 5 years from now, are you thinking UNOPS will now be as big as UNDP, UN Environment? Is that too much to think, to imagine? If, is there any ambition to maybe put resources to making sure that UNOPS grows in the mandated areas in a way it is good so that it becomes much bigger? Or is the idea to just say it is good now, let's just keep it as it is? Why change what is already working? Do we have any ambition beyond this? That is my question. Thank you.
It's a very good question, and I really hope we have an ambition together to grow our impact. I'm not sure that we should be very fixed on the comparison inside the UN. As I mentioned, the bigger Agenda 2030 will actually require that we go beyond, probably beyond our comfort zones as well. Cost efficiency, effectiveness is really important in what we do. I think financial growth is part of an ambition. It can even be measured, but it can never be the only ambition. It has to be linked to quality. It has to be linked to what we're able to do together. So also how we strengthen our culture in making sure that we're able to deliver better and better and better together. I think it's fun. We need to have fun at work. So this positive spiral of growth as an organization, as individuals, I think eventually also will cause a financial growth. So these things are interlinked. And I think looking at Marianne's numbers, and I will sort of close by this because we have come to 3 o'clock and well beyond. When you look at the numbers, since 2014, you have all been part of an extraordinary journey. And I've told you before, I'm proud, I'm humbled by being the executive director of UNOPS. And what I really hope we're able to do as an executive team is to take this journey further. You deserve it. And actually, I think we can do more to the benefit of the Agenda 2030 and ultimately the end beneficiaries of that agenda. That's what it's about. And next time when we meet in April, we will hand out the awards. Project of the Year, the individual awards, showcasing what we do and who do these things in, I think, a very optimistic and positive manner. We continue the journey together. Thank you very much for joining today, and see you next time. Thank you.